Welcome back to all SuperCoach Hub listeners. This is part 2 of our 2024 season review with Myth and myself, Realm. Now, if you haven't listened to part 1, we definitely recommend going back to the podcast and checking it out. It's a slogger, but we got through a lot of key information, so definitely worth going to listen to. We basically cover my team, so 1,000th ranked roughly, Myth's team, roughly 100th ranked, and Bryce's boys first overall, and compare all three. We go through all 5 key periods of the season. So starting team, the opening 1 to 6 rounds, the pre-origin period, the bye period, which we're going into this podcast, and the run home. If you haven't listened to that opening podcast, you get to hear us talk about our starting team in the first half of the season, go through a lot of stuff there. So be prepared. Now, we all want to see kind of we ending the round 12, going into the bye period. There was a total of 24 points between all 3 of our teams. Bryce's boys coming 30th. Myth was coming about 45th, I want to say, and I was coming about 43rd. So 24 points separated us. Now, obviously, we all ended up in completely different opposite ends of the spectrum to finish the season. Myth, looking at us, our 3 teams at the end of round 12, any massive indicators to see how we ended up where we did?
I think the biggest one is the team value. I think when we looked at them just before, we had your team, which was around about 14.4 in team value. Bryce's boys around 15.1 and mine around about 15.4. So immediately there we see that both myself and Bryce had a far higher team value than yours, which coming over the bye period, that's where team value is important. It's not important the last bit of the run home, as long as you can get 17 guns out, but over that bye period, when there's restings, there's those minor bye rounds with 3 teams on the bye, players resting,
surprise origin picks,
all those type of things. When you can sub in a gun when a gun is out compared to subbing in a plotter, such as a Smithies or a Salmon, those type of guys, you might get lucky here and there, and they might. Like I know Salmon owners did at one point. I think he got over for a double around.
He got a double in one game. It was the best day of my life.
Yeah, but if you gamble on those players too often, you're going to come out with a pretty poor average. And that's where that team value is crucial. Now, looking at my team value there and looking at the winners' team value is a little bit depressing from my side.
Yeah, you had a bit of a head start there. I'm keen to go through your team and kind of see where you went wrong compared to where he went right. So because that's 300 grand, that's basically a Smithies to an Olakawatu difference. So a massive jump there. Now, you said my team value is about 14.4 million. If you do want to see how it ended up so far down in the dumps team value-wise going to the bye period, check out that first podcast. I'll just sum it up in 2 words: Angus Saga. Yeah, I don't really want to get any more into it. We talked about it plenty in the last pod. But going into the bye period, I did not set up well for this first bye at all. I was trying to chase points because I was coming in the top 10 a few rounds before it. I was just trying to maintain fight fires. I wasn't thinking ahead. And I had my second worst round of the year in this first bye round, and it dropped me from 43rd overall, so right up around there with you guys, to about 270th, which was horrible for me, absolutely horrible. And that's basically where my season, rankings-wise, I really took the hit. The planning is the big thing for me there. In regards to bye planning, how much time, how many more rounds back would you start to look into that yourself?
Well, I think that round 7, 8 mark, I'm putting an eye on it. But again, we saw in that initial part 1 of our season review that Blake was trading in players that were playing Origin in round 9 and round 10. So
yeah, did a double of Yo and Carrigan in the one round, didn't he? About 3 weeks beforehand.
Yeah, and then Nanai around the same period. So you've got to be looking towards it, but you can't look at it too much. Otherwise, you're gonna put yourself in a position of not looking at some really good buys. And those points and cash purchases are really key around that period, around that 7 to 12. If you can get points, you can get cash. It's really hard to match those guys, but you can't neglect it. And the one thing that I've realized over the last few years is you've got to anticipate carnage. You've got to go into that round 13 by expecting to lose at least 1 or 2 players, because it happens every year. People complain about bad luck. Oh, this happened. We know it's going to happen. And if you don't prepare for that carnage, just as you found out, you end up playing 11 players and you're in strife.
Yeah, I think I did have some carnage, wasn't prepared for it in the way I definitely should have been. I think I ended up with maybe 11 or 12 players only. And considering that we used to have to fight to get a 17, not just a 13, pretty woeful from my part. Looking over this early buy period, I did well early in the season, not paying up for the likes of a Dylan Brown, those type of guys, but I ended up paying almost max price for the likes of Carraz, Brown, and that on this early buy period. And I think I just didn't have the team value to pay up for those guns when I probably should have been going back to try and generate that cash for the run home. And that really hurt me there. Trading in David Armstrong for all of one round in buy 13, another one that hurt. Yeah, trading out Lomax in round 13 when he went a 170 in the next round. Didn't expect him to back up from Origin, but I think that's definitely a misconception there that these Origin wingers and backs won't back up. We see it so often now. Brian Toto did it. Lomax has done it. That the backs, when they're playing a game only a few days after Origin, and they've gone on the record and said it's like going back to play high schoolers. Like they just are on another level. They come out and absolutely smoke them. If they're playing 5 days, I think that's when the body starts to hurt. I think a few players have said that before, but if they're playing 2-3 days later after Origin, they're going to go out there and set the world on fire. Did you have Lomax for that period?
I didn't have Lomax all season, which was disappointing because he was an awful death ride. Those wingers that are on the end of good attacking shape and have a good work rate, add in the goal kicking, it's very hard to get away with not having them because they've just got all the avenues to points.
Yeah, absolutely. Going past that 13, 14 abysmal rounds, 15 was one of my better rounds. I started to get back on the right trend. I traded in Teddy, which we all know. I got it for 824. It feels like it was massive unders. Looking back on it now, so quite happy with that. In the same round, I traded in Jaden Campbell, and that was the round he got like a 170, 180. So yeah, I had a huge push there. And carrying into that, I also had Latrell over this period, and I think from that 13 to 15 period, he went pretty big as well, which did help out. I can't remember exactly what he scored.
He had a big 130 plus in round 14, I think it was, against the Titans. Then in round 15, he backed it up with I think it was an 80, maybe 90 against the Broncos, but that had a sin binning, so that could have been quite easily another 110, 120 plus kind of score. And then he got called up to Origin.
Yeah, it was a bit rough, but look, I did trade him out to Herbie Farnworth and Moo. At the time, I think I was running Jaden Campbell at fullback even, so I didn't have that second gun fullback through that Origin period because I had traded out Dylan Edwards in round 13 to Latrell and trading out Latrell to a Farnworth. So I was running that one gun fullback in Tedesco, but I'll tell you what, in the center wing, Herbie turned out to be pretty solid. A friend of the show, Quinton, or the Dead Hand Gang, who finished, I want to finish 6th or 5th this year.
Yes.
Me and him all week were talking up Herbie to each other and trying to egging each other on to get him, and it worked out in our favour in the long run, so quite happy with that. Round 17, I think I made a fatal error here. Now, this is where I was looking to increase my I think I was chasing cash at this point, which normally you'd think sounds fine, SuperCoach, but doing it during the buy period and trading out Valentine Holmes for it definitely was detrimental to my team for the run home. So I traded Holmes out to Fletcher Sharp. Now, trading him out to Fletcher Sharp quite badly hurt me looking back on it. Got 520k in the bank, but that fullback spot was so incredibly hard to fix. Now, it took, I want to say 2 or 3 trades and a few 100k to fix Sharp because there's no security with a 200k fullback. There's no guarantee they're going to be an absolute gun that's going to make enough money. We rarely ever see it, if ever. Were you a Sharp trap owner as well?
No, I avoided the Sharp trap, and I think this is one of those examples of that early team value coming back to haunt you.
Yeah.
You had to, instead of using your centering 5, 6, and 7 slots to be able to make money, you're kind of forced into using a key spot to be able to bring that team value up, or at least attempt to bring that team value up. And I guess that's where we're seeing the example of missing those key guys through that early period, is that this is where it comes back to bite you. It might not bite you immediately, but it will.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it definitely hurt. Another one I forgot to mention as well, I didn't trade in round 13. I traded in 12 for this buy period, and that also hurt my team value. Joey Manu, so many of us did it. We saw early in the season he was going to be his points in fullback. He turned up twice that we've seen, I think, against the Dogs and Knights. Primed to be fullback once Teddy got picked for Origin. It was safe as houses, but didn't work out in our favour. I ended up selling him in round 18. I think that's when he got injured roughly, to Hines and Kalamatangi. I traded out Burton and Manu for Kalamatangi and Hines. That was when I think Burton was 18th man for Origin, so he wasn't getting picked for the club either. Not my greatest trades. Hines had to be sold next week. Kalamatangi was solid. That was when he was playing lock. He's getting 80 minutes and putting up 80 in base. So I was quite happy with him up until the last couple of rounds when just out of nowhere he's getting 50 minutes a game. Specifically looking at the major buy rounds, 13, 16, 19, my round ranks were 67K, 2,000, and 14K. So overall, it was very up and down. I'd say it was quite average if you're putting all three together. But if I had just kind of planned for that early buy period much better than I did, I would have been set up for more of them. And I think I would have not taken as many hits as I did across that run. Looking at those kind of that my buy period there, did you have any points or any lessons that you had taken an eye on?
Well, let's have a look at a couple of them. I think let's start with the positives. So let's have a look at Jaden Campbell. Please. Because you got on Jaden Campbell before a lot of other people. I think you come back from maybe a game or two at 6. Might have only been the one game when you got on, and he obviously paid off very handsomely with that big score against the Warriors. What made you go for Jaden Campbell at that time?
Let me just look up, because I remember he had a decent score, plus he was goal kicking. So at the time, 1 second, Jaden. So I had Scotty Drinkwater. I think he was on the buy in 16 or 15. That was his first buy. And then I think Galvin, I can't remember if I traded him out from a suspension or injury, or if I just thought he had maxed out. But I think I also needed the cash to get Drinky to Teddy. So
Galvin missed the game with a hand injury. That's
right, yeah. So I also needed the cash to get Drinky to Teddy. So I took my opportunity there and thought I'd take the pod on him. He had I thought the Warriors were a decent enough matchup. Obviously, at the time, there was a chance that I thought going to that game, Warriors might win, but they'll concede points. No, worked out in my favor. He had 2 weeks in a row. Looking at his stats now, he had 2 weeks in a row of hitting 70 plus in his first 2 games back. That alongside the goal kicking, I thought, why not? He's playing 16. He's playing 19. The 2 major buy rounds. I'll just get him in now, and hope he can consistently hit those 70s. And he ended up hitting 170.
I think a good thing to note at that time as well, particularly that position of 5'8", it was a real troublesome one most of the year. And a lot of people, I think the most common combination there was two of Dylan Brown, Lockie Galvin, and Cody Walker, none of which was setting the world on fire. Sure, they all had their pros and cons, and there was pros for each and every single one of them, but none of them were absolutely on fire. So that position, taking them on in that position with a player like Campbell, who we knew had a lot of attacking flair. He looked at the numbers. He looked to have a pretty solid work rate in terms of base, in terms of his runs, tackle busts, and put on the goal kicking. Yeah, that 170 against the Warriors in a bye round, absolutely huge to bring you back to the pack.
Yeah, he going into that game, the 2 games he had prior, which were his first games back from injury, in the 6 jersey, he'd had 4 offloads, a couple of forced dropouts, 9 tackle busts, and he was getting 15 tackles a game. And we know he loves his attack as well. So even just with his floor with goal kicking, it would have been about a 40-50. which I thought for an absolute dead position that was 5'8", just take a punt on him at 450k. Couldn't really get much worse for me at that point, and paid massively. So yeah, quite happy there. Now I'm happy to continue this positives train for my buy period if you have any more.
I don't think there's too many left of positives in your buy period, to be honest. But
Yeah.
you paid up top price for Carraz and Dylan Brown over this period. Neither of those really we can Bags. I guess if you held him all the way through, you definitely repaid it at the back end.
Yeah,
But
held Carraz and Dylan Brown all the way through from there.
But paying top price for them, look, probably didn't get overly much value, but I think both of them, Bags of that last big score, and Carraz, I think, would have had a few tons after you bought. So they kind of, it's not great paying top price, but if you're paying that and you're getting the points that you pay for, it doesn't kill you too much.
Yeah, I don't think they were bad trades by any means. I just that paying top price for them during the buy periods when I didn't have the team value to really justify it, that's where I see them as kind of hurting my team a little bit. Like I'm not going to make any cash from them. They're going to pump out, 65, 70 average to 75 for Carraz maybe. But they're not going to really get me an edge up on the opposition when I'm down 600 grand in team value compared to the others. So that's where I see the negative in that. Now, we'll just say that coming out of the buy period, round 20 is the last minor buy. I did make one trade. That was after Cleary got injured again. So I traded. When did I trade in? Round 19, major buy. Traded in AJ Brimson. That really hurt. Now, at the time, I thought massive pod. No one's going to be on him. It's his first game back. Could go massive for the Titans. They've been rolling the last few weeks. Now, I really should have known injury history. Give him a little time to get back on the field. It's like his third injury this year. I really should have left that for a week or two before jumping on, especially with looking at also how good Kinney had been. They didn't necessarily need AJ Brimson at the time. Like Kinney had been that good. AJ Brimson could have been dropped to the bench at any point. So I think that was just a misjudgment from my part. Did you have any opinion on the AJ Brimson trade there that I didn't already mention?
Yeah, you kind of nailed it there. I think a lot of people did go in, or at least he was popular among some of the SuperCoach chats I was in, simply because we know what he can do at fullback, or 5'8", and Titans were looking good at that point. There was a lot of reasons to take him on as a risk, but those huge injury risks that we talk about, it can be a great pod going early, but we've just seen what happens when it goes wrong, and it can go really wrong. But more so than getting him, it was the opportunity cost of not getting a certain other player, I think, that probably hurt just as much, if not more.
Yeah, definitely. And look, I think I fixed that the next week by getting in Cleary for his 170. I think that was the week he played the Dragons, got the hat trick.
Yeah.
Unless that was the week after. I think I might have got Cleary in a week earlier than most. I know you jumped on Cleary early as well. I think you straight.
I think you're forgetting a certain Manly fullback.
Oh, of course. Yeah, Tommy Turbo. Yeah. I was kind of hoping we didn't have to mention him for the rest of the pod. I was hoping we just skip over him. I know you'd be in the same boat. Look, his first game back in the centres, round 18, that's the red flag that pulled me off him. He played centres against the Cows. He got outrun by, I think it was Jordan McLean. He looked absolutely busted. I was like, nah, I can't do it. He's going to be run. His body's busted. He's not getting back to the Turbo he was, at least for a few weeks. I'll take the pod in a Brimson and 19 rather than going a Tommy Turbo. Well, I think that's the lesson. It doesn't matter how busted Turbo is. If he's playing at Brookie, especially against a team not in the top 8, he's turning up. And in round 19 and 20, got a 119 and a 174, both at Brookie. So for me to make that mistake again, very, very unlikely.
I think let's talk about him now just because we're on it. It's the same issue for my team. I didn't go Tom Trbojevic when I really should have in that round 19. My takeaway, looking back on it and looking at the decision-making, was for that round 19 and round 20 period, you had Tom Trbojevic, granted, looked awful the week before, but he had Knights and Titans at home on a Sunday afternoon in back-to-back weeks. And if you looked at all the other fullbacks, all the other gun fullbacks, Latrell was injured. Tedesco had a bye and Storm. Pappenhausen had a bye and Roosters. You had Drinkwater had a bye, and I think it was Bulldogs. It was Bulldogs or Sharks. It wasn't a great matchup. You had Dylan Edwards, Origin, and then I think he had a good matchup, but he had the injury troubles over Origin, so he wasn't really anticipated to back up in that round 20 matchup. Ended up not playing anyway because of the injury suffered in Origin 3. But you look at all the gun fullbacks. Kalen Ponga wasn't back yet. If you went turbo, you were putting him up against no one. There's no one you could put up in that fullback position up against turbo to try and match his points. So it was almost, even though he looked awful, and even though, and it's going to seem dumb saying it, the points he got against the Knights and Titans were the easiest Supercoach points as you'll ever see. He didn't look even overly great in those games, but he just puts himself in the position to get points in that Manly attack. Easy points on sweet plays. We know how well they're scored for fullbacks. He backs up the middle, so gets those tries when Garrick goes through or Saab goes through. And there was a try against the Titans after a big break where he just got a lineback try up the middle when the Titans were completely scattered. They're a good attacking team, and to put it simply, with those matchups and those games, it was silly not to go him, even if it was just for a 2-week punt, because even if you came out with a 65 and a 70, you weren't going to get hurt by another fullback. So it's where someone like myself, who was low on trades and looking for keepers and not thinking a 2-week punt was worth it, would have turned out to a lot more than a 2-week punt, because he might not have looked overly great in those Knights and Titans games, but after he came back after Manly's bye, he looked prime turbo again against those Raiders, Warriors, and Tigers, and he went 3 tons. So he killed you, he killed me. Big reason why I have the 77th rank instead of a top 50, top 20, even top 10 rank, because there's no one to match him for those 2 rounds. You got to take those opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's a bit of an anomaly as well. Like, we look at other players, and if they seem busted, you stay off them, and that's going to work 99 times out of 100. And that one time it works is for turbo. So I think he's kind of a special circumstance, Supercoach wise, for when he's busted. Regardless if he's playing a Brooklyn, you just get him. Definitely something that we take into the new year for sure. Now, any other points over my bye period, or happy to move on to yours, please?
We'll move on to mine. My bye period, before we finish off on yours, you started the bye period in, 43rd? Finished the bye period in 614th. So
so a little bit of a drop.
What to do.
Yeah, a little bit of a drop off.
So for me, I was the one of us that held steady. You went back. Blake went forward. I stayed steady. I started the bye period 45th, finished the bye period at 58th. So starting at the early part of it, the Terrell May. I
didn't mention it for my part either, but if you haven't listened to the first part of the podcast, we both sold Terrell May before Origin, before the bye periods.
Yeah, to put it simply, the one thing we've learnt so far from these 13 player bye periods is you need the big scorers. It's really that simple. If you miss even one popular guy that goes big, it's so hard to get a green arrow because you've got less players to make up those points. And Terrell May, I think, turned up in both those bye rounds, had some other decent scores around it. And the week he had a low score, he was an easy bench for people that had him, because you saw that score coming from a mile away. So I think over the bye period, he would have averaged 80, 90 for owners. And that's
quite surprisingly, he is very easy to predict. Going into the season, he was only 5% owned because people were so scared of his unpredictability. Turns out in Supercoach, he's probably the easiest forward to predict. Like, weeks when to bench him, when weeks to start him.
Turned around. I think it's, you know when he's going big, and when you're rolling the dice. When it's that full forward team, full strength team, he could come on and play 55 minutes. He could go on and Robbo watches him and he's playing insanely well, and Robbo just keeps him on the field. But we know when Collins is out, Lemieux is out, when Maria Hargraves is out, you can predict big minutes are coming and use a safe score or a big score. So he is kind of predictable in that way. And I reflected it on the last podcast in part 1, and that was a bad hold for me, holding Smithies over Terrell May, and it came back to haunt me over this period. But that was probably a big error. And otherwise, my trading was solid. I kept hunting for these bottomed out guns that I'd done the 6 rounds prior. These ones just didn't hit as regularly. Nikora was the highlight of the buy period for me. I think after holding Nanai up until round 13, and then what happened was I had the opportunity to downgrade. I didn't want Nanai over Origin. We spoke about how backs over Origin maybe you're going to back up and they're less impacted. A forward like Nanai, when they had Finn Fuiaki and Lukey to come in and cover his position, was an easy sell. Nikora, it was a little bit of a dart throw. He was cheap. He had a lot of Supercoach pedigree, and it was backing on a regression to the mean that he's too good of a player. He's too quality of an NRL player to score 2 tries in 12 games or whatever it was coming into that week. And he's an example of you never judge a trade-in on its 1 week, because I think the first week I got him, he scored 44. The next week he scored 61. Looks like a very average trade-in. The following week he goes 120. All of a sudden, it's nearly an 80 average, and he looks like a superb trade-in. From the rest of the season, he killed it.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
I continued grabbing guns, Appy, Ronaldo, Sam Walker, Olaquatu, Campbell. Didn't get Campbell for the 170, but got him for his ton on the buy round against the Eels. And Osako. Some of those went well. Some of them were okay. The idea was great, but I probably missed a few better buyers. I missed Colin Matangi, who looked primed for big scores over the buy period. I missed Damien Cook, who killed it from about that point onwards. Cody Walker was solid. And we'll talk about Latrell a little bit more when it comes to Blake's team, because I think here I was a bit of a victim of circumstance, but I think that's better explained in his section, so I'll come back to that. I think a big reflection for me on this buy period was the impact of having no Dolphins. I kind of pushed myself into a bit of a corner.
They played all 3 major buys from memory, is that right?
Yeah, they played all 3 major buys, and they had a buy in round 14. Holding a few too many Roosters, holding a few too many Raiders meant that I couldn't really focus on these guys for round 13, and as a result, it meant I was poorly set up for 19, which came back to haunt me. But it's just something to reflect on. That team that plays all 3 buy rounds, particularly if they play then 2 of the minor buy rounds, you want to get a couple assets from them. I think Max Plath was a great buy. He served people really over that period.
Especially considering how poor that 5'8" position was, getting his 60s and 70s in there every week. Massive.
Yep, and then it also resulted in me missing Tyrone Wishart, who was arguably one of the best cheapies of the season.
Yeah, he had been fantastic.
And you look back on it when people bought him. Had an extended run in the halves. Previously had showed in 80-minute games in the halves he got a really good base. Storm had a great fixture run, and he's a decent NRL player. Like, you look at all those things and you're thinking, why didn't we get him? And for me, the guys I was having to sell for him were Dylan Brown, Lachlan Galvin, players that played round 19 that I wasn't willing to sell. So I think a big lesson for me is flexibility in this buy period is important. The more, if you can grab a few of those guys that play all 3 buy rounds, then it just gives you flexibility with other moves to jump on guys that look unreal that could be key players over that period.
Yeah, definitely. Now, so just going back to a point you said before, when we were talking about Terrell May, and you said you went Smithies over May. Was that because of the Canberra buy schedule, or what was the thought process there?
To just say it briefly, because I think I covered a little bit in part 1, but essentially it was, I thought at the time Smithies was less likely to lose money. I thought Terrell May was going to keep plotting out 30s and 35s that when he was not getting those minutes, and he would get really low and he wouldn't have any value to sell with. And Smithies at the time wasn't as bad as he became. He was more a 50 to 55 guy rather than a 40 to 45 guy when I sold. So I was thinking just he wouldn't drop much. He would hold that value and I'd look for around 14 sell. But what I just didn't really consider enough was what was the upside of them both. I was looking too much at the downside for both of them because they were both not really great holds at the time from what I thought, but those should have just looked at the upside, plain and simple. And the only other reason was I think if I held May, I was going to have a problem at second row forward when Kai Pearce-Paul had the bye. I was only going to have two decent second row forwards at that point. So that was another factor. But again, didn't look at the upside enough. Look, the last part comes to round 19 before we do. Is there anything there that you think is worth a mention or you want to point out from my bye period?
No, I think one point would be how many trades across the bye period did you use total?
Okay, I'll get it up. So I tried to hold off a little bit.
From 13 to 20, I should say.
So just give me 1 second and I'll get it up.
Because I myself use 16.
So I use 3 in round 13, 2 in round 14, that's 15, 1 in round 15, that's 6, another one in round 16, that's 7, none in round 17, 2 in round 18, and 3 in round 19, that's 12, and then another 2 in round 20. So 14 overall for me. And
yes, I used 16, and just having a look at Bryce's boys, I believe he used 18. So he went quite hard in this bye period.
So there's that advantage of being able to have saved a few trades early. And the trades he saved over me throughout that initial period, some just due to luck. I got a couple more injuries, and some due to better planning. I flipped fullbacks when I didn't need to, and there were definitely a couple wasted trades in there. So combine those two, and yeah, there's the difference, because now we'll get into that round 19 for me, which was a problem.
Yeah.
This is where I was talking earlier about you've got to make sure you're prepared for carnage. You've got to trade, so you've got 13 heading into that round, right? I had 12 as of round 18 for round 19. I lost Nico Hines, my trade in round 18. I lost Tolu Kola, my trade in round 18. And I had Ben Trebojevic still. I held on to him, thinking he might be useful across it, and his duel was useful across the bye period as well. Lost him for round 19, so I played short in round 12. Thankfully, a big pod 130 from Ronaldo saved me, and I only copped a small red arrow. But if I had 13, I move up. If I had 14, I'd probably move up a little bit more. Because carnage and I traded poorly at times through the early period or wasted a couple trades there, I couldn't load up without impacting my run home team. So I had to take the gamble and hope that carnage didn't strike me at the wrong time, and it did. That's just the simple nature of it. You can protect yourself against bad luck. It's going to happen at some point in the season, and if it happens at the worst time for you, then that's the impact.
That's it. And we said it a lot in the first part of the podcast, and we'll probably say it a few more times here, that there is an element of bad luck in SuperCoach, but the best players or the skillful players or the people who win it or are up there and about every year put themselves in the best position to kind of nullify the bad luck or at least fight it. They have other options. They have plans to beat it. They're going to players who aren't AJ Brimson, who have a massive injury history. They're going to Tommy Turbos, who have shown they can get 200s at rookie on one leg. So that I think that's the difference there.
And look, we look at the top team. We look at Blake with Bryce's boys. Had Lukey for his injury-affected 9. Brought in Garrick the week he got knocked out for a 9. Brought in Sam Walker, I think, at the end for his 8. He did still cop bad luck. He still had injuries. He still had to face these things.
Traded in Payne Haas as well. The week he got injured. I think it's like 3 weeks in a row he traded someone that got injured.
That happens to the top person that wins as well. The difference is, 1, they handle it better. They keep the good reasoning going. And 2, they're making sure their other trades are worthwhile, knowing that they're going to have to spend some trades on it. And 3, the only luck component is when it happens. You're going to have bad luck. And for me, this was the worst week it could have happened. Every other round 13, I was ready. I was ready for carnage. Round 14, I was ready for carnage. Round 16, ready for carnage. Round 17, ready for carnage. Round 20, I was ready for carnage. But the one round I wasn't ready is the round it hit me. So, look, you've got to plan for each and every one of them. It's that simple.
Now, having a look at your major buy ranks, I just talked about mine before, and I said they're about average. So it's actually a lot worse than average. I averaged a 28K round rank, so a lot worse than I actually thought. What would your kind of average for your round ranks be for that major buy period?
So I had a 40K in round 13, which was one of my worst weeks of the year. Thank you, Terrell May. Had a 4K in round 16, which was much stronger. And then had a 20K in round 19, which had a small red arrow. So looking at the math of that, around about that 21, 22K mark across the major buy periods, I would classify that as probably about a C. It's not great.
Yeah.
It's probably a pass mark to hold it together. I had some big rounds around it. Round 15, I went quite big. Had a top 1,000 round rank, and that really brought me back into the top 50. So, look, overall, there was a couple things I got wrong over the buy period for sure. I think it was a consequence of some early tradings. I think if I look through the guns I brought over that period, Nikora, obviously a great buy. Appy was hit or miss. If I played him every single week on the run home and got his big scores as well, he probably ends up a decent success. Ronaldo's hard to comment on because he got injured. I wonder, given how many tries Stone Street scored on that edge, that he might have been quite a nice guy to have for the run home.
Yeah, for sure.
Sam Walker was a good buy. Ola Kawatu, again, I think good reason buy. JC, again, good reason buy. Went reasonably well on the run home. Asako, that was probably my one mistake. I got too focused on the round 19 fixture against the Rabbitohs and AJ and Alex Johnston's wing, thinking he would ton up that week, and I didn't look enough at going, or didn't consider enough his run home, which wasn't great. And that got me caught out because I focused on that matchup a little bit too much and missed Turbo.
Yeah, and that'll happen. Well, look, speaking about getting Turbo, we'll move on to Bryce's boys in his buy period. So going into round 13, he was around our rank. He was 30th, so he was a total of 20 points ahead of me total and 24 points ahead of you total. He ended the buy period at first overall, so his buy period worked out a lot better. Now, we talked about our round rank average for 13, 16, and 19. Mine was about 28K. Myth's was about 21K. His was just a tad over 7K. So he had round 13, his round rank was about 2,200. Round 16 was about 2,700. Round 19 was about 17K. So that's where he kind of he didn't do too well, but he was coming fourth overall at that point. He maintained fourth overall, even with the 17K rank. So didn't take too much of a hit, and then ended up being first the next week. So big points over round 13. I think we can sum this up in 2 words, like I've done a few times. This one's no Manu. So you and I both went for Manu. Do you have any ideas as to why he wouldn't have gone Joey Manu in round 13?
I think I actually know exactly why he didn't have no Manu. And this came down to one of the biggest shifts of the season. And I think it was a big shift for my team as well, being a James Tedesco owner. Dylan Edwards picked for Origin Game 1. Saturday leading into Origin 1, Dylan Edwards news comes out that he's done his quad and he's ruled out, and then James Tedesco is brought in. So at this point in time, Bryce's boys traded in Latrell this round. Now, to me, I'm thinking that was actually meant to be James Tedesco on round 13. Not planning to bring in Joseph Manu because at centre, he was above 800K, not exactly essential, and he could miss him. It was a guy that was fine to miss. I think everyone would have said you didn't need Manu if he was playing centre, but at fullback, he was desperately needed. So I think this is one of those flips where the news came through too late. I would say Blake actually couldn't get to Joseph Manu because Manu didn't have centre wing dual anymore, and he was forced to death ride. I think this was actually probably one of the luckier moments for our overall winner, that Joey Manu scored probably his lowest score in fullback about 10 weeks, in about probably 10 or 15 games at fullback. And he captains Scott Drinkwater, who scores a ton against him. So a really, really big swing for Blake here. And looking at his trade-ins of Latrell, who most people pivoted to once Ted was laid out, who then went on to score big scores in round 14 and round 15, and not needing to get Tedesco straight away, and then not being able to get Manu, ending up being an absolute blessing in disguise.
Yeah, absolutely. And looking at the other two trades you did there, one that you did as well, Nickera, got him for under 600K, run home, absolutely massive. Traded in JDB for 620 odd K. Not sure about that one, but he did trade him out in the next major buy in round 16 and only had a 30K loss on him. So I guess that's not a fail of a trade. A guy that played the 13, 14 buys. I can't remember what scores he got, but couldn't have been too bad to only lose 30K. So not horrible, not great. But he traded out the likes of Angus Crichton, Nanai. So he walked out of round 13 with a 200K plus in the bank, which is absolutely massive for that next week, where he did bring in the likes of Dave Fafita and Jerome Hughes. And I mean, we saw what Fafita did. Oh, sorry, what Jerome Hughes did on that run home. From that point, he probably got a 90 average maybe from Jerome Hughes, which would put him at the best halfback Supercoach wise in the comp. Did you? Well, you didn't talk about Jerome Hughes during our buy periods. I'm guessing you missed him as well as I did. Signs there for Jerome Hughes as a buy. Is there any reason why he would have gone and we missed him?
I had him. So
you did have him.
I grabbed him. I grabbed him pretty early. I think when a lot of people went to Sean Johnson, got a ton. I traded out Cleary the week later, and I thought Jerome Hughes matchups actually looked a lot better. Overestimating that Dogs matchup at that point in time, didn't have them as a top 4 defense. At that point, I brought in Hughes for that matchup, but then I held him when he got injured with the calf because there weren't any halfbacks that I didn't own that were killing it at that point. So I kind of just held him. The one time this year probably that holding an injured gun in a key position actually paid off.
Yeah.
But in round 12, Cam Munster went down. Round 14, Jerome Hughes was leading the ship for his side and didn't had all the ball. Over that bye period, he went 117, 108, 90, 78, 101, and then had a 25 against the Roosters in round 20. So that 5-week period was about 100 average.
Yeah, he's. I don't know how he still went under the radar with how good he did. Like, that is a massive turning point. I guess because most people had either Hughes or Walker. There wasn't many teams that ran both. And at the time, Walker was going massive as well. So it kind of it covered up the bleeding a bit of not having Hughes, because Walker was also coincidingly going quite well. It was when Walker went down is when Hughes really, really hurt teams. Did you have Walker as well, or were you kind of going in and out with Hines?
I was running both at the time. I grabbed Sammy Walker for Hines in round 13. Again, I think that was just a more of a cash move. Hines was a lot at the time, just came off an injury-affected 3 against Penrith. Figured it was named for Origin. Figured he wasn't backing up in round 14. So then went round 13, round 14, round 16. There's only one match he can actually hurt me in. And I think that for a lot of the time is something you've got to think about for these halves, is who you can put up against a player that's only going to play one game in a month that could hurt you. They might score a ton that round. They might, but you're relying on them so much to do that if you hold them. Like for the people that hold Hines, it was almost a fail immediately in that Dolphins game. They needed a ton to break even. They needed a 150 to be ahead, and that's a lot to rely on for one particular player.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think having both of them absolutely helped, massively helped you throughout this buy period. Just having a look through Bryce's boys' team, don't think he had Sam Walker at all during that period. The only time he brought in Sam Walker was in 25, who then proceeded to do his ACL. So through this buy period, he actually had Sean Johnson as his half alongside Hines, then traded out Hines for that when he got injured to Jerome Hughes. So held Hughes and SJ up until round 18 when he traded SJ out for Hines again. Then had to trade out Hines a week later. I think he must have moved up a Dylan Brown to a halfback because he traded in Jaden Campbell at that point. So he was running Brown and Hughes at halfback up until he traded in Cleary a couple of weeks later. So no Walker during that period, but he was able to cover that up with Jerome Hughes, who actually exceeded Sam Walker. So yeah, I think that is Jerome Hughes is a definite difference maker there. Not having Walker, I'm surprised that I only just realised that. But I think that shows getting those key guys in Hughes and Tedesco, Fafita, Garrick, AFB, Jaden Campbell, all the real popular buys were crucial during that point. And a lot of people wouldn't have gone the obvious plays during that period because they're trying to pot up, going the buy rounds, they're trying to get the best buy coverage. Looks like he just went pretty simple and just got the best guys in at the right times. Also getting Turbo in 19 or 20 whenever he got him in definitely helped his case. Around 19, he actually went the double of Olakau'atu and Turbo. So, yeah, that definitely helped him out massively. Yeah, two key halfbacks. How pivotal is it through that period? Is it by specific? What are your takes on that?
Well, I think if you look at it, Sam Walker over that period, a few people got him for his 100 against Canberra, where a few people went early on the Hines out. But over the bye period, 88, bye, 52, 109, 56, 65, 39 against the Storm in round 20.
It's maybe like a 70, 75 average, roughly.
It's good. It's good. It's great, but it's not killer. What Jerome Hughes did was hurting people. That there's at least 100 points between them over that period of time, which is where a lot of people would have got stung. Sam Walker did go back-to-back tons after the bye period, but again, unfortunately for a lot of people that held Sam Walker that whole entire time, that injury-affected 8 really dampens the average that you held him for and played him for. It's where those single-digit injuries really do hurt you across the season. But you're right, you nailed it.
He even traded in Sam Walker for that. Didn't have Sam Walker at all during any of the good points. Trades him in for his 8, but he's able to fix it, keeps a calm head, gets in Jerome Hughes, who proceeds to get like a 180 and then gets the highest Supercoach score of the season. So absolutely massive.
And look, like you said, he just got the right guys in. He got Nicaragua in, he got AFB in, he got Hughes in, he got Tedesco in. He just really just got in the guys that you've needed. And as long as you're having the key guys over that period, that's what really matters. Like he had Latrell over around 14, 15. I think he captained Latrell for his big score as well.
Yeah, I think he captained for his one. We stressed
it earlier. Yeah, and we stressed earlier he had a nearly 110 average with captaincies, making sure you have the big, important fullback and spine players for these periods are crucial.
Yeah, absolutely. And having a look at his captains over this bye period, he captained the fullback every single week, except for 19 when he looped Jaden Campbell, who got a 111. Other than that, he captained fullbacks every other week. So just with the safe captain basically every single time. Maybe played a pot option on VCs, can't see that, but played it safe. Copped a couple of 80s, but the rest were all over tons, and that was huge during that terrible bye period. Look, any other points you want to make over his bye period and why he might have stood out, or happy to move on to the run home?
No, key fullbacks, key guys, getting in safe guys as well. Like, again, you look through his trade-ins, what there was an actual punt. There's really nothing there that goes, that's a huge zag. Like, Fafita was popular in round 14. Garrick was popular in round 15. AFB was popular in round 16. Tedesco was popular in round 16. Ola was popular. Turbo was popular. Like he just got all the guys that you needed. It was really that simple, and he had enough. Actually, there is one point I wanted to make for him. I believe he always had more than 13. From memory.
Yeah, right.
I think he always had more than what you needed on each of those rounds. That's just going off the top of my head, so I'm just going to really...
In round 13, he had 15.
Yep.
14
and round
and
16. Yep. And he went big in round 16, so I'm going to be shocked.
I think he had 15 and 19 as well. So he was always had that couple over, and it didn't like going through those pre-trades, the pre-origin trades. It wasn't like he was specifically going out and getting the crucial buy plays. Like he was getting in Paddy Carrigan, Isaiah Yeo, stuff like that. So it's interesting to see that he had that many. So it must have been, and like we said, he used the most trades out of the three of our teams over this buy period. So it looks like while he might have got a few guys in beforehand, he really went hard over the buy period using the trades rather than setting it all up beforehand.
Yep. And he had 14 in round 16. So every single time he had more, you're avoiding a dodgy score. And there's always going to be a dodgy score. Like I think I had Sam Hughes in my score in round 13. Of course, he drops a sub 20 the 1 week I need him. Like those things are going to happen, right? So you've got to prepare for them to happen.
He dropped a David Armstrong 20 and a Sam Hughes in 13. Would have dropped a Sean Johnson 9 in round 16, which would have hurt so many super coaches. And in round 19, I think he would have dropped a 14 from Marju. So cutting off those scores from very highly owned players as well, who people would have had in their top 13, is a huge difference maker there. So definitely something to take on board for next year. Look, one thing I do want to point out is the amount of trades we all had for this run home. Now, I had 5 trades from around 21 to 27. How many did you have coming out of this buy period?
Having a look through it, I think I might have been really similar. I had 1 extra. I had 6.
Right. So I think having a look at Bryce's boys, he had 7. So extra. He did have that one up us on there. So he must have saved a lot of trades going into the buy period because he used the most out of all of us there. So going into round 13, he had 25 with a boost left. So he definitely had the leg up on us there without overplaying his hand early and using so many trades early on. He still used 4 boosts. So it looks like he just saved for those weeks, went hard for those couple of weeks that really saved his trades for this buy period in the run home, which obviously worked out in his favor. Look, my 5 trades, I'll just go through them quickly for the run home. Round 21, finally fixed up my fullback spot. Actually took another 2 trades. I went sharp to Trindle, so I moved Jaden Campbell down to my other fullback spot. And then the week after, I traded. I think I got Trindle in just for the cash for 2 weeks. He had a massive negative break even because I got him in at 500k. Ended up selling him 2 weeks later for almost 700 and got in Kalen Ponga. Kalen Ponga, one of my better trades for the year. Even though I'd missed Turbo's early weeks, Ponga for the run home did beat him for those last 4 or 5 rounds. Quite happy there. Sold Eli Katoa for Olakawatu. That was when Eli Katoa got injured. The next week he had Penrith. So I was like, no, I don't trust him to even play 80 minutes. And coming up against Penrith, shouldn't get a good score. I think he scored a double that week against Penrith. So yeah, it is what it is. Probably shouldn't have traded him, just held him because I didn't have enough trades to play funny games like that to just do a sideways trade to Olakawatu. Round 25, had to go Cleary out, went Lomax for the run home. Lomax having a couple of good games to finish the year. He didn't score badly at all, but would have very much liked a Jerome Hughes despite the resting in 26. And then my final trade, this one is a massive turn for my season. So going into round 25, my ranking, at the end of round 25, my ranking was 996th. In round 26, I had a massive round, and it could have been even better. So I was playing Jaden Campbell against the Jaden Campbell in round 26. I think he had an okay matchup, nothing fantastic. So look here. So he was my starting 5'8". He was versus the Knights. What I was really afraid of was not having any Penrith players. And they were coming up against the Rabbitohs. Penrith about to start the finals. They want to be in that good form. And I was quite worried about not having a Penrith player in my side. And this is with the Cleary injury. So, I had plenty of money in the bank from trading Cleary to Lomax. I had like 300k in the bank. We'd seen what Luai had done with no Cleary before. Going into the finals, they want to be in good form. I thought, I'll take the punt. I'll have Luai this week. He versus the Titans next week. Should be 2 massive scores in a row, potentially a good VC option. But it meant I sat Jaden Campbell. In that game, Luai actually scores about 3 less than Campbell, around 26. So lost points doing that. the week after, this is with now Sam Walker out as well. So I don't know if I had a halfback for the last game. It might have been Dylan Brown as my halfback for the last game. Means Luai gets a 20 odd against the Titans and Jerome Hughes gets a 180. If I don't trade in Luai in round 26, I likely trade Sam Walker out for Jerome Hughes against the Broncos in 27. Because the reason I didn't go Jerome Hughes in 26 was because he was resting. We talked about it before the pod. If I do go the Jerome Hughes out in round 27 instead of Jerome Luai in 26, I think I finish top 500. Because after round 26, I was coming 480th. Instead, I lose about 500 spots. I drop from 480 to 997, barely sneak into the top 1K. So, yeah, that one really, really hurt. A net negative of 200, 300 points just from just pulling the trigger on Luai early when I really didn't need to. I had Campbell playing. Campbell not in a bad matchup. That one definitely hurt. Do you have any points there or anything standing out to you at all?
Well, we'll talk about Luai a little bit as well in my team. But I think my lesson from it is those final 1 to 2 trades, they're not for speculative picks. No matter what rank you are, no matter what you're chasing, no matter what you're doing, you save them for slam dunks. You save them for proven SuperCoach assets throughout the season with good matchups in good teams. Luai, sure, he went on a hot streak without Cleary, but we've seen him play for multiple years now. He's never been a real SuperCoach weapon. Even when you look back on it, a lot of the big scores came with Cole as well, not with Schneider. Even that alone should have been enough for us to go, okay, well, this isn't a lock. It could be really good, but we can't really confidently say he's going to score well over the last couple of rounds based off all those pedigrees. It was still very speculative. It was a dart throw. I think those last couple trades really need to be for slam dunk picks the whole way home, to be honest. I think so many times I've seen over the years people do kind of sideways upgrades. They're small upgrades, but they're trading out someone that is still pretty decent, and it burns them more often than not. So I think the run home, unless it's to get a gun 17, if you're trading gun for a gun, that run home, it's probably not worth it, and you're better off saving the trade.
Yeah, well, I saw that with Katoa and Olakau'atu. Olakau'atu not firing the way he was earlier in the season. What I really wanted from Olakau'atu was, and this is never going to work out, but a hedge for Turbo. Having Garrick in the team, now Olakau'atu, Turbo going massive. I couldn't get to Turbo because he was too expensive at that point, and I had my eyes set on Ponga. So I just wanted a piece of Manly, basically, so that if Turbo's going big, hopefully Olakau'atu is contributing. But trading out of Pele Katoa, even though he did have that week off from injury, then he played Penrith the next week. I didn't think he was going to be playing 80. That was just a misjudgment from my part. I shouldn't have traded him out as a gun. We know he's going to be playing leading up to the finals because they're going to want him in the team in the finals, so he needed that form going into it. Misjudgment from my part. Shouldn't have made the trade, and if that happens, who knows what happened? What I use that last trade on instead. So many of those final trades that I made just seemed unnecessary. I don't know if I'd classify them as panic because at the time I was also in a couple of head-to-head comps, so I was thinking that my mind was there as well. At the time, I was also just trying to make the top 1K. Thought I was pretty set up until round 25 when I was 996. That's when I kind of hit panic stations. Needed Luai in for these last 2 games. Cam was not going to do anything against Penrith. Yeah, so that's I didn't keep the cool head like I should have.
And yeah, those last couple trades when you're chasing as well, you're looking to make up ground. And it seems like going the 40% owned guy, I can go this 5% guy and I could really shoot up the rankings. It doesn't hit too often. And there's a lot of factors that come into play. Like we were both in a $250 entry cash comp, which we were looking at, which I know impacted my decisions a little bit on the run home when I knew I wasn't in that race for first, changed my thinking a little bit. And a lot of people are in here and might be listening to this podcast, might be in head-to-head cash comps and overall. And once you know you're out of the overall, it changes your thinking a little bit. Once you know your financial gain is going to come from head-to-head, you switch to that. So I think impacts a lot of people's trades in the last few rounds in particular. Yeah. But I think if you're just going for your best overall rank, saving those last couple trades for slam dunks is really the way to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a definitely lesson I'll be taking into my next season. And it shows why I finished where I did compared to me coming 9th and 10th earlier in the season, going into the bye period, coming about 40th to finishing up about 1,000th. We can see where I went wrong there. And I've said before, I definitely went the unconventional route of getting to 1,000th. Normally people are in and out of it all season, whereas I didn't leave the top 1,000 at all from round 4. Bit unconventional, but it's probably good to see it done this way. Because you won't hear many people talk about this route of getting to 1,000th rank or how high they were up early and how they fell off so hard. So definitely some good lessons there. But, we'll move on to... Oh, did you have another point?
I think let's just look at that for a second, though. You finished 1,000 and you completely botched one of the periods. Yeah. Arguably the most important period of the season. You botched the bye period. Somewhat as a result of some trades beforehand, but that's where your rank really slipped off. So I think for a lot of people here that maybe are searching for a struggle to get to that top 1,000, maybe haven't gotten that yet so far, that realizing you don't need to be perfect, you don't need to be superb over every single period. You can make mistakes, but if you continue just making good decisions and you make good decisions through most of the season, it's usually going to be enough for that top 1,000 finish, because you missed probably one of the key cheapies in Crichton, probably the key guy over that period, and you still managed top 1,000.
So Terrell May, who was key over missing Turbo, missing Hughes. We could talk for 2 hours about just the mistakes I've made. I still finished top 1,000.
Yeah, exactly. So it also shows that a lot of good reasoning decisions, a lot of good decisions throughout the period will also hold you far, even if you make some mistakes. Yep. I think we've got 2 more teams here to cover, my team and Blake's team, but I think just for a bit of a comparison here, I think we go into Blake's before mine, just to show you what you can do if you're right at the top over that run home. Because over round 20 to round 22, he brought in Grant, the hooker with the most SuperCoach pedigree of the lot of them. He brought in Cleary, the halfback with the most SuperCoach pedigree of the lot of them. Payne Haas, the front row forward with the most SuperCoach pedigree of the lot of them. You see where I'm going with this. And then Angus Crichton, Valentine Holmes. He brought in the safe, high upside guys who easily could have been the top averaging players in their positions on the run home, and a couple of them were.
Yeah, for sure. He got lucky. He got unlucky with the Haas injury and stuff like that, but for a majority, it worked out fairly well.
I think Haas injury aside, if we sat here and said he's probably going to average the most on the run home, if not top 3, I don't think anyone's disagreeing with us.
No, absolutely. That's what I mean. He likely was the top probably 2 front row for the run home, injury aside.
Yeah. And this, again, is going to prove our point about you don't need to be perfect. On the run home, he sold Britton Nickera. He sold Kale Iro. Both of those guys who went absolutely nuts on the run home. I think Nickera had a couple 90s, a big ton at the end. Iro, I think, had 4 or 5 80-plus scores in a row. He also benched Dylan Brown for his 160.
Yeah, that's it. He actually made probably more mistakes in the run home than he did in any other part of the whole run. So, he brought in so many guns that got injured the week later. He sat people he definitely should have played. He made probably more errors in this run home, yet from round 21 to 27, he was first the whole time. Had a massive gap at the end as well.
Because all of those players, he had a big week from Grant, where people around him didn't own Grant. He had a big week from Angus, where people around him didn't own him. He had a big week from Holmes, where people didn't own him. He just had, quite simply, the vast majority of the big scorers. And when you're leading, you can do that. When you're in the top 10, you can do that. He saved the trade all the way up until the final round and brought in Ponga for Tom Trbojevic. Again, a slam dunk trade on a premium asset with a good matchup at home.
Yeah, and look, one thing we haven't really talked about, and we never really hammer on about, is saving trades. Like I'm not the type to say save all your trades, you'll go big in the run home. Like that's not really how I play SuperCoach. I wouldn't say that's how you play SuperCoach as well. But he didn't save a massive amount of trades. He saved. Let's have a look. He saved about 3 for the run for those last couple of rounds, and he managed to get Ponga in the last round. And he did make even those ones that didn't work out. Ruben Cotter, Sam Walker as his last few trades in. Even though they didn't work out, he only needs really one or two of them to strike. Or if he wasn't a Hughes owner, getting Hughes in that last round, just saving like one or two just for those last couple of games for those massive surprises is so important.
I think for me, it was because I didn't own Hughes for that last round, which was absolutely killer, as you can imagine. That this year for me, I was kind of convinced there wasn't going to be that really obvious big smashing on the run home. But as soon as the Dolphins destroyed the Broncos in round 26, I think everyone, their mother, their dog, their siblings went, Storm are going to absolutely rinse the Broncos next week.
Yeah.
And you wanted as many Storm assets as you could, and I couldn't get to them personally.
Yeah, and that's why when people say, like, oh, how do you know you would have traded Hughes in the last round? Like, you never know what you would have done. Hughes is the obvious player to get in that last round. I was trading in a half the week before. If I don't trade in Luai, I'm trading in a half in round 27, and it's Jerome Hughes because I didn't have a Storm player. Eli Katoa was my last afflicted. So I didn't have a Storm player going to that, and that was the prime matchup of the round. So yeah, that one definitely hurt. Now, did you have any other points in regards to his team for the run home, or did you want to talk a little bit about your run home?
I think this is pretty simple. He got the best guys. He saved the trade to the final round in case he needed it, and you can't have everyone. So he missed Nakura and Iro, and he benched Bags 160. Again, it's just reinforcing that lesson of you don't need to be perfect to win SuperCoach. But I was chasing, so I was in a little bit of a different position. So I guess my run home was a little bit different to others. So just getting mine up at the moment. Give me 1 second. So no turbo. We've gone over that. That was my big error. You mentioned earlier that Ponga matched turbo for those last sort of 3 to 4 weeks. It would have been pretty tight. I think the big score from turbo with the captaincy against the Tigers may have leaned it in his favour, but it ended up being a difference over that last month, 5 weeks. That was not really an impact, not a drastic impact. Not owning him when I only had Tedesco and Drinkwater against good defensive sides very much hurt me. But my big move on the run home was Dane Laurie. And I'll maintain that this was just simply a good move. Worked well. Could have worked a whole lot better and was an element of bad luck. I think we knew Edwards was out for about a month. We'd seen Laurie's scores at fullback. We'd seen him get into the same positions as Dylan Edwards for those easy points. We'd seen a similar work rate. And when he was available at 5'8", which we already talked about, was a bit of a problem position. There was even some scope for Laurie to spend time on the right wing, given round 18, he played on the right wing over Sunia Taruva. So there was also the opportunity that he would actually continue out there, and he did actually continue out there for a round or two following his stint at fullback. Whilst this was a great trade-in, I think the week I got him, he got injured. He's on 50 points after 20 minutes, got concussed, missed the next week's home game against Newcastle, came back, good matchup, played 80 minutes and turned up against Para. I believe then he moved out to the right wing against the Storm, where they happened to score on his right wing for the 10 minutes he was off the field getting his HIA. And then he went 90-odd on the wing against the Raiders, even though he played very poorly that game and subsequently got dropped. But look, it was about a 130, a 50, a 40, and a 90. So he ended up averaging about 80 for me. But if he doesn't have those concussions, it could have been over 100 average over a 5-week period in a position where not many people had a really good scorer. Brown over that period at 5'8" wasn't great. Galvin was solid over that period at 5'8". Campbell was average. So it was a really good opportunity to put points on in a position that was tricky. He was by far, in my opinion, at that point above. And this is one of those cases where for me it was a slam dunk use of a trade, so I was willing to go sideways. My error was I sold Drinkwater for him instead of Galvin. I sold Drinkwater instead of Galvin because doing it that way meant I had 3 routes to go to Ponga in round 23 via Jules. It could have been Jaden Campbell if he broke, and given his injury record was a likelihood that I was willing to say was pretty high. could have sold Galvin if the other two didn't go down, or if Laurie got dropped, Edwards was back earlier, I could go Laurie back to Ponga. So that's why I sold Drinky, but I should have been looking at the points. Drinkwater had a Tigers matchup, and he went 135, and the whole advantage of Laurie was having more gun fullbacks than everybody else. Well, and every other person that didn't go Laurie. That was the whole point of it. And I'm not sure what points it ended up being because I might have held Drinky and missed Ponga's first big score. So I'm not sure how much it hurt me, but it hurt me a little bit. And it's more so the reasoning there. It was a last-minute flip decision for me. But anytime you can get more gun fullbacks with good matchups than other people and the majority of people is an elite opportunity to zag. That's the zags rather than a pod.
Yeah, absolutely. Like that's by far and away the best position in Supercoach. You might see a halfback take the top spot of Supercoach every like when Cleary's healthy or Hines at his best. But if you're looking at the top 20 averaging players, 10 or more are going to be fullbacks. Yeah, like there's a ridiculous amount of gun fullbacks.
So if you can get more than other people with good matchups, like that round 19 to round 20, the people that had Turbo and Tedesco had more gun fullbacks with good matchups than any other group. And that's where people made moves. And then people with Laurie that were able to fit him in alongside those two made bigger moves.
Hammer at the start of the season, like anytime you get that fullback option, it's normally a pretty safe option.
It's a good risk to take.
Yeah.
The only thing last to mention with my last two trades, they were Luai and Hines, and we've kind of covered that. They were speculative picks. That simple. Hines, I've paid too much attention to what he's done for me in the past. I had him last year for his round 4, 180 against the Dragons as a pod captain when every other captain scored about 30. So I've got good memories of going Nico Hines early. And I think probably those memories played into my thinking to get in this year for the last two rounds when I could have gone elsewhere and I should have probably gone elsewhere. I zagged from Lomax last second when he was going to be playing centre against the Eels, and then he moved out to the wing after 15 minutes and scored all his points on the wing. So
I talked up his positioning at centre there all week leading up to that.
Yeah,
I said he was a buy regardless. He's running it to Lungy. He's a buy regardless.
Didn't score points at centre though, did he?
He was there for 10 minutes.
Yeah. But no, that the avoiding Lomax I can live with because of the reasoning. The getting Hines was the mistake. I should have been looking elsewhere. Should have gone somewhere else. I needed to make my last trade in round 26 because I would have been short otherwise. I think I had two injuries that week, 2 dropped, 2 out on buys, 2 resting. So I didn't have a choice but to make my move in round 26. There was no holding to round 27 for me for Jerome. But yeah, that again, speculative with the last 2. It was a lesson learned for me.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's a good kind of point to round it up with. So we've gone through the 5 key periods of the season. Again, if you haven't listened to the first episode of this, or the first half of this, where we talked about our starting teams, our opening run of round 1 to 6 and round 7 to 12, definitely go back and have a listen. It might provide a lot more context to some of the stuff we've talked about. But look, we're probably getting close to a total of 2.5, 3 hours of the 2 parts combined. Are there any final comments you'd want to make? Maybe would summarize the key lessons that we learned from 2024 specifically that we want to take into the next year?
I'm happy for you to start off with that, and then I'll jump in with anything that I think you miss.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, for me, the big thing, I've said it so much in the first half, was patience. That was one thing I definitely lacked a lot of. I would trade out guns early. I would kind of panic and not go with the people I needed to go with at the right time. I just didn't show enough patience this year. Whereas if I do, my team looks a lot different. Not overthinking captaincy. We saw the leader, Bryce's Boyce, went through his captains. He only went from a non-fullback, halfback captain maybe twice this year, and one of them was a loop, something along those lines. So sticking with that safe captaincy option was absolutely massive. For me, my main thing was patience. I'll keep saying it over and over in the off season as well. I'm just going to have to keep saying that to myself. So that would be probably my main point. there. What would you say your biggest takeaway from 2024 would be?
I think for me, it's just a reminder that vanilla's good. I think you only need to play vanilla with maybe some sprinkles on the side to be able to finish in top 1,000, top 100, and then to even win the whole thing. The winner went with really safe captaincies, really premium assets, really plays with pedigree. He got in the guys you needed. His pod the whole entire season was just having most of the guys you need. That was it.
Yeah.
He had the right fullbacks at the right time. He had the top scoring guns at the right time. It was really, really that simple. But I think the other thing is it's a winner's game. It's a leader's game. And I think one thing we looked at was by round 12, 7 of the top 10 were in the top 100. By round 20, they were all in the top 100 with 9 top 50. By round 21, all were top 50. I think but after round 6, only 1 was in the top 100. So it's kind of a case of you've got to start well. You've got to be in a strong position by that bye period. But by the end of that bye period, you need to be up there to have a chance. It's really hard to come from really far back. You can do it, but getting those key guys early is absolutely crucial.
And that's massive as well. So just talking about what you just said in regards to certain members of the top 10 being hitting the top 100 at key points. In round 6, you were coming 5,000, 6,000 overall, roughly around there. You finished top 100. They're in the top 10 finishes of SuperCoach, top 10 overall. Only one of them was in the top 100 by round 6. So it doesn't go to show like the opening rounds, with how important they are, it's not about the points. It's about setting up your team and moving from there. You're not getting those massive points early. The first major scoring round was in round 8. That's where there was a top score of like almost 1,800. So we're not getting those massive scores early. It's just so important to have that team organized and making the right moves early on. So that's just another a key point I wanted to throw out there.
Yeah, look, we could keep talking for days. Probably one of the other major lessons that I've learned, also looking at Blake's team, is looking at each position as a slot. Who have you got at second row forward 1 compared to the rest of the SuperCoach? Who are most people running in their third centre wing spot? Where can you take an advantage over them? And he saw second row forward as an advantage early, and that sort of worked for him because he got him up. He got some big scores from plays in those positions where people were running out plotters. Less plotters. Don't get plotters. It's probably
the best way to start. Sell Jamin Salmon as soon as he can. Know that. That's my takeaway from 2024. Now, but look, thanks, Myth, for jumping on. You can catch us both very, very active in the SuperCoach Hub on Discord. If you haven't joined, go to the link. I'm assuming will be in the bio on both Spotify, YouTube, anywhere you can find us. We're both extremely active in there. There's very exciting things to come in the hub over this off season that will involve both Myth and I, so keep your eye out for that. And I'm sure we'll be jumping in a pod soon to talk about our 2025 early watch list, something along those lines. But no, Myth, thanks very much for joining us, mate. And we'll speak to you in a few weeks, I'm sure.
Always a pleasure. Here's to a better 2025.
That's it. All right. Thanks, guys.